Right,
Exactly.
right. But Antonio, the point you make about for every dollar earned, a dollar spent into the economy, the question is whose economy? If we're spending the dollar in Chinese economy, then we're losing jobs here. So I like your idea, buy local. The other idea, buy American. I read all the labels. I can't buy 100% American. I think it's virtually impossible to do so.
Right.
But you can buy a lot more American. And most people don't pay attention. And now, unfortunately, you go to look at the labels, somebody's lobbied Washington, and on the labels now it'll say distributed by, and it won't even say where it's made. So this is another problem. If we don't know where the products are made, how can we even buy American?
So Michael, do you think it's a fact of, with this economy, and we're talking about the most, I guess it would be the most macro effect, right? What's going on in my home, is the issue then to talk about one's personal fiscal responsibility, but is it just about someone's personal fiscal responsibility? If I have $0 on the bank book, what am I supposed to balance?
No, I totally agree. I often ask students, how do you know what you don't know if you don't know? So it's really easy to say, well, a consumer has to educate themselves on a certain issue, but where do you start? How do you know which direction you're going in? Which direction do you go to next? So I think we as a society as a whole have some sort of responsibility to educate the average citizen to some sort of minimum financial literacy. As far as buying local.
But let me ask you this, not to cut you off, but do you think that we are the most financially literate people on the planet?
No.
No, I not at all. There's a
Germans are.
There's an author whose name escapes me now. He does a lot of different skits. So he went into like a Walmart and he asked everyone what did the Dow stand for? What is the Dow? What is the S&P 500? And he got all kind of sorts of answers. And these were like college
Well,
students.
he was at Walmart though.
Stop.
Yeah. The only. So I think.
See, he doesn't even know what to say after that.
Yeah, so I just think that a lot of the average consumer, the average household has absolutely no idea what they should know, what they should do. So it's kind of up to society as a whole. Kind of piggybacking off of shopping locally and looking at labels. I kind of disagree. I think that every firm, every company in this nation should compete. So I have an obligation to my household to find the best price, whether it be an overseas good or American-made good. So it's up to really, in a capitalist society, it's up to that firm to compete.
But Michael,
I will say, I know. I will say that we as a nation, we do a poor job at creating an environment that enables the average small business to compete. So I don't think it's my obligation to pay more to do that. I think, like what I said earlier, it's up to us to hold our representatives accountable to maintain an environment that these small businesses are able to compete.
But there's no more powerful factor in the economy than the consumer decisions they make in spending. That is going to drive everything. And if we all want everything as cheap as possible and buying the cheapest stuff at Walmart that's all made in China, but yet we want good paying jobs, we want pensions, and we want health care, it's not going to work.
And that's the point I want to get to when you talk about a person's responsibility to do the research. Okay, so I want to make 2 points. Number one, I'm going to be realistic. I'm a working mom. I'm married. I've got 4 kids, and I'm busy. When am I going to have time to do the research? Number one. I understand what you're saying. You have to do the research. People do research on certain things, big ticket items. Like I do the research if I'm looking for a car, do the research if I'm looking for a home. But am I going to do the research if I'm looking for the best deal on deodorant this week? Some people do. Some people do, but everyone's not able. So I ask about the time that's spent and what resources are there out there for people to look at that kind of does the work for them, per se, to say, okay, let me go to this particular resource to see if I can compare.
Well, you can use Shop Savvy on any Android phone. And I mean, I live by that. If I can find it cheaper at Amazon.com or something, I'll just go ahead with my Amazon Prime account and get it that way. So I thought that one of the things about the Google service there in terms of shopping, Yahoo shopping, it's actually driven prices to converge closer together than they ever have in the past. And firms are forced to compete, as Michael said, because that information is so readily available. I mean, with Shop Savvy, you put in your geolocation and it'll tell you that there's a store 2.5 miles away that's got it for $3 less. You know, if there's a number of other items you want. And that's really decreased the cost of shopping and doing that research. So it's tremendously easy.
Okay, now I want to go back to the point that Linda made about Walmart. I am problematic. I find Walmart a little problematic. I do. Is because I really think that as much as Walmart provides, you know, everyone goes to Walmart because it's known to have like the lowest price, and now they've got this price comparison where they're going to match it right there on the spot. But in some ways, when we talk about what's our local responsibility, then I feel as though oftentimes that we are enabling, we are feeding the monster. Are we not?
Yep.
We're feeding the monster. Where's Walmart getting all this how are they getting all these great prices? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think somebody walks into a Walmart and says, wow, that ream of paper is 10 cents. That's outstanding. How'd they do that? I don't think anyone actually says how they do that. They just go, oh, that's a good deal. Give me 10 of those.
I would like to pose it in a different way, is that you're looking at an industrial economy. And when I teach economics in my classroom, I say there are 4 types of economies. There's the agricultural economy, there was the industrial economy, there was the information economy, and now we're actually past that. We're in the creative economy. I remember running across this book, it really described it. In essence, the product life cycle, the life cycle of TV shows, the life cycle of everything that we have is so short that the real value that's created in the labor market is being creative. To be able to come on the show and provide entertainment for someone, to be able to come up with a slight variation on the Android product and get it out, the slight variation on this new electronic device. So that when we're talking about worrying about industrial jobs, that's 2 economies ago. Even an information economy is an economy ago. Those kinds of jobs, anybody can be taught to read English, which you see that in China and in India, can take our jobs away from us because they have access to computers. So the information economy is global. We can't stop it. But the creative economy we can, and that requires intensive schooling and a different type of generative thinking, that is to generate new ideas instead of tearing things down through critical thinking, because maybe that's my own bias that way. But that we're talking, by focusing on Walmart, which has its own issues, and I usually bring up the video from Frontline TV series, is Walmart good for America? And my students are divided half on that. The half that our parents and shop say, yes, it saves you money. The other half that are students and don't shop very much for themselves, no, I don't want to buy foreign. I'd rather keep jobs domestic. That's a clash that happens, but we're still looking at jobs related to 2 economies ago. The economic jobs that were good in the 60s and the 70s, and the professions where you had unions and factory workers that could earn a living wage and be able to get out there and have a home and have a car and have a retirement. But we moved beyond that. We moved beyond the information economy into the creative economy. And it's that highly skilled workforce that's going to be able to answer that call.
But Linda, some would say, you know, Antonio, that's great, but it's all for naught. It just seems to some that it's already planned out. It's already designed. The deals are already made. When we talk about the role of corporatization in politics and things of that nature, you know, when you talk about business, the private business sector and politics, they have such a close relationship. It's almost as if they are one. Am I not?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? And so then, Linda, how do you respond to the student that says, you know what, it's all for naught, it's all planned out, so I'm just gonna, I give up?
I would still say that the power is still in the hands of the consumer. Even at Walmart, they are bringing in organic products that are grown here in America to serve a need and a demand for people for better, healthy products that cost a little bit more, but are affordable when a company like Walmart is able to carry them. So it's still decisions that we make. Yes, obviously we don't produce the same things we used to produce, But many of the things on the shelves, you can find the same thing made in America and the same thing made somewhere else for virtually the same price, sometimes less the American product. But I don't see people looking at the labels. It's just something to consider. Even a little bit of a change by the consumer can drive tremendous change in terms of where the jobs are.
All right, so we got about 3 minutes left. I'd like for each one of you, if you can give me just your final remarks. Michael, begin with you.
Well, I think that the individual has the ultimate responsibility for themselves. I think the individual is responsible for their own budgets, their own finances, and I think that the voting individual has an obligation to hold their own representatives accountable. We need to demand sound money policies. We don't want to overregulate businesses so they can't compete. We don't want to overtax businesses, and we don't want to run up a large deficit. We want to create an environment where all companies can compete, and then let the companies compete. If we look at labels and we do those things in favor of American companies without making them to compete, then there's no incentive to. So I'm all in favor of a super ultra competitive market and individual responsibilities.
And I want to address your last question. I mean, we're looking at the next presidential election being the first billion-dollar campaign. And when you go in and look, for example, working paper 502 from the Levy Economics Institute out of New York, the top 1% of the United States owns 42.7% of the financial wealth. The next 19% own 50.3% of the financial wealth. That would leave for the rest of the 80% of us 7% of the financial wealth in the United States. And so there is a small group that has the power to go in and influence a billion-dollar election, some of which the average person cannot have that impact.
What do you say, Linda?
I don't know. I mean, from a political perspective, when you look at elections and who gets elected to Washington, who gets elected to state government, it's always the people who are able, virtually always the people who are able to raise the most money, no matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. So as long as that is the system, the main contributors are not the average Americans. So the policies being driven out of Washington are going to reflect the main contributors. So I don't know how easy that's going to be to change unless you see some kind of change in the way people are elected. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Or until we go through enough pain to where people are forced to pay attention.
Yes.
And it's funny you should say that. I know we're supposed to be closing because I always I always ask people even when I'm just sitting around a conversation, we're complaining and we're venting about the economy, and I always go, so are you angry yet?
And it's that chaos.
Are you angry yet?
Anger that will lead to the changes like we saw during the Great Depression when we saw the system of capitalism rock to its foundation.
While what takes place in a few blocks of space in New York's financial district might not seem to have an immediate effect on our lives, Wall Street is a powerful force in American politics, and it will continue to shape policy decisions made on our behalf. I encourage all of us to keep learning about stock markets, what makes them tick, and how they impact our lives. Also, be aware that there are more economic indicators out there other than the few we might see on the nightly news. Especially in these economic times, paying attention to them will be well worth our time. For the professors, I'm CM Winters Palacio. Thank you for watching, and please coexist.